In my years of watching the NBA, the Pistons have never been good. Granted, I am 20 years old, so I started watching the NBA around 2010, 2009. And the last season that they were actually contenders was the 2007, 2008 season when they were the second seed in the East, but they lost to the Celtics in the conference finals, who ultimately won the championship that year with KG, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. But ever since then, they've gone through a flurry of coaches and horrible seasons. The best seed that they've been since that conference finals trip in 2008 is the eighth seed, which they've done three times in the past, how many years is that? 15 years? They've been the eighth seed three times. And other than that, they've been around the 12 mark. And I'm looking at their playoffs right now for those three seasons that they were the eighth seed. They haven't won a game. They have not won a playoff game since 2008. And around 2012, I think it was, I was a big Josh Smith fan when he was on the Hawks. And he got traded to the Pistons, which that was not a good trade by the Pistons because Josh Smith basically lost interest in basketball at that point. So I think it's safe to say that the Pistons need a revamp. And they've been desperately tanking the past 3 or 4 years to try and get those young, good pieces for their cornerstone of their franchise. And I've liked the moves that the Pistons have been making the past couple years. I love the Jaden Ivey pick. I loved the Cade Cunningham pick, even though he was clearly the favorite to be the number one pick. Killian Hayes, I think people thought he was going to be good because he was so young when he was drafted. You know, he was from France. Everybody loved the overseas players coming in. They were the big hype at the time. I mean, he's let's just say he's been trash. You selected Sekou Doumbouya with the 15th pick in 2019. He also didn't turn out. You drafted Bruce Brown, which was a great pick, but you don't have him anymore. So really the only two players that you've drafted that you still have are Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. And who knows, in the next 5 years, they could be the number one backcourt in the league. That's how much potential they have. But I'll talk about the roster a bit later. I want to talk about the coach. Because for the Pistons, for the past 4 years, they had Dwayne Casey at the head coach job, who got fired right before the Toronto Raptors won their first NBA championship with Nick Nurse. But the year before that, he was coach of the year. So a lot of people, when Dwayne Casey came in, were like, oh, okay, we have some solid young guys. Dwayne Casey was just coach of the year. Maybe he can turn it around. Obviously, it didn't work out between Dwayne Casey and the Pistons. I just don't think he is the type of coach that you want when you're setting up a young core. And in my opinion, he may be overpaid right now. Monty Williams, I think that was a great pickup by the Pistons. I don't know why he was let go by the Suns. I think that was a horrible decision. They let him go for Frank Vogel, which makes no sense to me. And Monty Williams did an amazing job with developing Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and leading them to the playoffs. They had the best regular season record with Monty Williams at the head. So I think that's just a great pickup for the Pistons. So what's the roster looking like for Monty Williams? He's got Cade Cunningham, who's terrific. He's been plagued with injuries, so we haven't exactly seen his full potential. We saw Jaden Ivey last year, who also missed a good chunk of the season due to injury, so we also didn't get to see him very much. But from what we have seen, they're very promising. Jaden Ivey's he's a very good attacker to the rim. He's very athletic, very fast. He could probably work on the passing and the facilitating and just limiting turnovers. Cade Cunningham can do it all. He's a triple-double machine. He could, at full potential, Cade Cunningham can easily average a triple-double throughout the whole season. So obviously the Pistons, they have those two players. They have their two bright future players. But then you also got Jalen Duren. Jalen Duren is young. He's 19, 20 years old, around there. He just played his first season. He had a very good first season, in my opinion. Maybe a little bit of a bigger learning curve for him at center. He's already super big. He's very athletic. He's very good at rebounding as well. He can't shoot, but he's great on the pick and roll. He's great with lobs. I think he can be up with the conversation of a big three in Detroit with Jaden Ivey and Cunningham. And all three of those guys are under contract until 2026. I mean, that's when Cade's runs out, but I would think the Pistons are going to sign Cade to a heavy extension once it's up. And then you have Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, who are set until 2027. So until then, you don't even have to pay them that much. So maybe in the off seasons, you can snag some good role players, maybe even a slightly like big all-star type player, perhaps. I know Detroit doesn't have a lot of perks for living there that players look for when they're choosing a team in the off season. I mean, it's Detroit, so it's not tropical, it's not hot, it's cold in the winters. It's a Midwest city. It's a Midwest city. The only problem, though, with signing is I think they kind of dug themselves a hole last season when they signed Bojan Bogdanovic. Bojan is a great player, but for what he's getting paid, I just don't think it's worth it. I mean, you're not going to be able to trade him because I don't think anybody's going to want his contract. He didn't even play much last season. I'm pretty sure he was injured as well. I mean, now that I'm looking at his stats, he played 59 games, which isn't horrible. He only missed 23. He averaged almost 22 points. That's pretty good for a shooter like himself. So with Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham developing more and being able to drive more, pass out, leak it out to the three-point line where Bojan mostly is. And if you're in trouble, Bojan can make his own shot. He's very good mid-range. He's just not a very good rim attacker. He's not very athletic. He's getting older. He's 34. But you probably have good enough years with the contract he has left. Maybe the last year isn't looking so great for him. So I think we need to answer the question of why Detroit was so bad last season. Because you had Bojan, who averaged 22. You had Jaden Ivey, who averaged 16, 4, and 5. But I think the real catalyst to why they were not doing so well is because they didn't have Cade Cunningham, their first overall pick from 2 years ago. He only played 12 games last season, and he's only played 76 in his career. I mean, that's not too bad, which means he played 64 games his first season. But 2 years ago, I think even though they had a better record this year than they did 2 years ago. No, they had a worse record this year than they did 2 years ago. I think the team Cade Cunningham was on last year was worse, but they had a better record because he was playing. And to be fair, I think the Pistons were tanking a little bit. It didn't work out, which I actually kind of love because I love the new lottery rules. So it doesn't go like the top three worst teams all get even odds. But they did get very unlucky with getting the 5th overall pick this year. But the Pistons need to be careful because the pick that they use this year, the 5th overall pick, needs to be a good player. Like, he needs to be a solid player. He doesn't necessarily need to be an all-star, but he needs to be verge of all-star if they want to be able to do something in the future. Because like I said, they're not going to get a lot of big free agents. They're just not. Because they're going to have to pay Cade Cunningham. They're going to have to pay Jaden Ivey. And I think Jalen Duren's going to show out in the next couple of years, and they're going to have to pay him too. I think that's going to be the big three. So if you can draft a guy at 5, like one of the Thompson twins, who have a very high ceiling, I think that's great for your team. The Pistons, they just have loads of young talent. Like, they traded for James Wiseman at the end of the trade deadline last year, who he hasn't played many games. I don't think we've seen James Wiseman's potential yet. I don't think we've seen his full potential. I think James Wiseman can still be a very good center. And I mean, you have Jalen Duren, who I think is going to be better, but who knows? Maybe you go a big 5 and 4. You go like really tall, you go really big because Cade Cunningham's already big. So you could just have a massive lineup. Because I think Cade Cunningham's like 6'6", Jalen Duren's almost 7 feet, James Wiseman is 7 feet. Jaden Ivey's not short by any means. He's like 6'3". Bojan's not short either, so you could have a big lineup. They also have Marvin Bagley coming off the bench, who I think he's gotten enough reps in to show what he's worth. So I don't think you're going to get much out of him, but he could still improve. He's a great bench player. He's not bad by any means. Like, he's still on a team. Killian Hayes, you're going to have to get rid of him at some point. I think you've tested him enough to the point where you know what he is, and he's just not great. You have Isaiah Stewart, who's another solid big man. So if James Wiseman doesn't work out, you have James Wiseman who can be your backup five, which is great. I'm just looking at their lower lineup right now. They got RJ Hampton, they got Hamidou Diallo, who are two very athletic, smaller type players. Like RJ Hampton, he could be your backup point guard. Who knows? I mean, but all this changes too with who you draft this year. We still have a whole offseason to go, so they could obviously sign some more people. And the Pistons could look great in the next years. I don't think they're going to be a title contender next year. I think for it to be a successful season, the Pistons need to make play-in. They need to make play-in or the playoffs. If they make the play-in or the playoffs, I think that's a successful season for what they showed last year, being the 15th seed, being last in the East. And when they're looking on adding more players and whatnot and deciding what they need to get better at, it's honestly everything. They were 29th in points per game last season, 27th in opponents' points per game. They're just bad on both ends. But yet again, I think Cade Cunningham is going to bring that offensive rating up. He's a decent defender. Jalen Duren can only get better at defense. Jaden Ivey will get more used to the flow of the NBA. He'll get better. They also had a horrible turnover rating, 29th in turnovers. That's horrible. And again, that's on Jaden Ivey and the ball handlers. But I think they're only going to get better under Monty Williams, who, like a broken record, he's a great coach. I think it was a steal for the Pistons to pick him up. So, well, I guess we're just going to have to see what happens tomorrow. Pistons got the 5th overall pick. I doubt they trade it. I really hope they get one of the Thompson twins. I just want the Pistons to be good in my lifetime. I just want to see the Pistons at one point be a contender. That's all I want.